So my teachers are allowed to wear jeans every day. If jeans makes my teachers happy, then that's a very simple thing for me to do, and it costs me nothing.
Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Ms. Sherry Watts, the principal and CEO of Minaloa Charter Schools, Inc. for the past 9 years. With over 22 years of experience in education, Sherry has made a significant impact on the lives of countless students and educators. As a former teacher, she has been recognized for her outstanding work and has even been published in Principal Magazine and Education Week. Sherry is also the founder of the Elementary Mentorship Program and has presented at numerous professional conferences. Welcome, Sherry, to the show.
Do I think there should be higher pay? Yes, of course. When I started teaching, the starting salary was $33,000 and change in 1999 here. It's just now, 24 years later, at $47,500. There is no career that grows that slowly in the pay range.
Based on what I hear, I'm ready to fly and work in your school.
Come on. Yes, I would love it.
The Avenue of the Strongest is a podcast dedicated to exploring the lives and experiences of the most inspiring individuals from around the world. Each episode features interviews with fascinating guests who share their insights and wisdom on a variety of topics, including education, impact, motivation, health, and learning. Here are your hosts, Anayet Chowdhury and Vlad Suleiman.
Welcome to our podcast. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Ms. Sherry Watts, the principal and CEO of Minaloa Charter Schools, Inc. for the past 9 years. Welcome, Sherry, to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and take you back to almost 20 years ago, or actually more than 20 years ago. I want to hear about the story about why teaching. What got you into being a teacher in the first place?
So I knew I always wanted to be a teacher. I used to subject my brother to being my student, and I would teach to my stuffed animals, right? And use my closet as my blackboard, at the time. But when I went to college, I was a little hesitant to go down that route because I was just like, well, I'm not sure. Let me go with the business major. So I did business. I actually then went to social work, and then I went to gerontology. And I eventually just was like, you know what? You've always wanted to be an educator. You need to quit fighting this. Do what your passion is and what you're going to love. And so I changed my major to education, and I have never regretted that. As a matter of fact, I think I would have regretted not doing that.
This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning educational publisher serving over 1 million students nationwide. If you're a kindergarten to 8th grade teacher or principal, be sure to check out our supplementary workbooks to get your students ready for standardized state testing. We cover all subjects from kindergarten to 8th grade. Use the coupon code AVENUE for a 25% discount off of all purchase orders. Visit us today at argoprep.com/store.
So I've always wanted to be a teacher.
No, that's amazing. And I want to learn about the transition from being a teacher and then getting into school leadership, which is ultimately the principal, right? What motivated you to transition to a teacher and now to to the admin side of things?
So when I started teaching in 1999, I was a 7th grade math teacher. I loved it. I loved the connection with students. I kind of moved into leadership roles gradually in my first couple of years of teaching. And then I decided I need to pursue a master's degree. I wanted to pursue a master's degree. So what was I going to do? So I went into my principal at the time, Dr. Hal Cuddy, and I said, so I'm looking at 2 areas, guidance or administration. And he said, Sherry, you are not a guidance counselor, you are a leader. And that's exactly what you need to pursue. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take it from somebody who's seen me in action. And so I pursued ed leadership. And I think the biggest thing is I knew whether it was guidance counseling or ed leadership, I wanted to make a bigger impact and have an impact on at a broader reach, if you will. And so with the encouragement of pursuing ed leadership, I did that. In my 3rd year of teaching. And so I finished my master's degree when I was 4.5 years into teaching.
Got it. Got it. And I completely agree with you that as you move up the ladder, I guess in any industry, you do have a broader reach. As a teacher, of course, you're supporting an incredible, whatever the amount of students, whether it's one class, two class, depends if you're on teaching at the elementary level or the high school level where students are shifted around. As a principal now, you are now dealing with every teacher, the teacher, the custodian, every staff member who are then responsible for a subset of 20 students. So it is a bigger outreach and it is a bigger responsibility, and you are making a greater impact. But I do want to go back into teaching. It's not surprising to say teaching has always been a hard job. I've spoken to many teachers that have been on the job for 20, 25, 30 years, and they said, hey, listen, the climate right now is difficult, but teaching was never easy. Teaching was naturally always hard. But I think to say that this profession has become increasingly challenging over the years. There are a record numbers of teachers experiencing burnout and frustration. I want to ask from the principal side of things, how can principals help teachers overcome burnout? How should principals support teachers in today's climate?
Well, I think you have to give teachers autonomy in the classroom, and I think you have to trust them that they're going to do their job. So I am not a micromanager. I do not tell them how they need to deliver instruction in their classroom. They know the standards that they're required to teach, but how they deliver that, I leave completely up to them. The sad part that you see in education is that it's becoming more and more about teachers being on the same page, the same day at the same time. Everybody doing the same thing. And to me, that is the fastest way to kill passion in a situation. And the bottom line is we're not dealing in a product like a pen, we're dealing in human beings. And so everybody learns at a very, very different pace. And every teacher's classroom is going to be completely different from year to year, just by the nature of the students they have in that classroom. So to tell or expect, for example, in my grade levels in elementary, I have 10 teachers on a grade level. To expect them to be teaching the same lesson in the same way, well, they're very different people. They're unique, just like the students in the classroom. So for me, what I tell them is, the standards that you need to teach. You need to come together to select core standards that you want to address, that you're going to do similar common assessments on, but there's only about 20 power standards that I want them to pick from. Then do common assessments based around those common standards, so they have a comparison, so they can share and discuss, why is my class getting it and your class isn't? What can we do to help you move forward? What are you doing that's engaging your students? But the rest of the standards and how those lessons are delivered is completely up to the teacher, and it looks different in every classroom. Some teachers are more comfortable with one type of instruction than another. Some are better at direct instruction. Some are better at centers, but it's up to how they feel comfortable, because if they feel comfortable, then it's going to be engaging for the student. So I would say that is key in education, is that if you're going to hire a teacher, then you need to trust that teacher to do the job that they've been trained to do and that they're coming to you saying they want to do. Second, you need to make sure that you're creating an environment in which they're free to do that. And it also needs, what I tell my teachers is, my job as the principal is not to tell you how to do your job. It is to create an environment in which you are free to do your job. So how many disruptions do we have throughout the day? I'm adamant that we do not have a lot of all calls, that we are not bothering the classroom experience, that things flow very smoothly, that we're communicating what's happening each day with the staff, so they can plan accordingly, whether it's we have a fire drill coming or it's going to be unannounced, but it's going to be today, so they're on the ready for it. I also think it's about making it fun and enjoyable. So I've kind of taken a step back as a principal. So my teachers are allowed to wear jeans every day. Some places that is not the case. But if jeans makes my teachers happy, then that's a very simple thing for me to do. And it costs me nothing, right? Yeah. So I say you can wear jeans. I just ask that you wear a nice shirt. You're in a school shirt or a college shirt, something along those lines. And my teachers love it. So we went from just Fridays being casual to now they can wear them 5 days a week. We also
Mhm.
do different activities. We're doing a career board right now. And so we have teachers telling us what were the jobs that they've done in the past, and we have them anonymously posted. So just fun things like that. I think it's important that you make it a fun environment, that you hear laughter in the hallways. We have my coaches are going around, they leave big post-it notes on my teachers' doors. What a great job you're doing today in the classroom. And those are still hanging on my teachers' doors from when they've gotten them in September. So I think it's just creating an environment in which people are looking forward to coming to work. And we just did a survey, and 95% of our teachers say they enjoy coming to work. And so
Oh,
for
wow.
me, that means we're doing something. I also have a leadership group made up of teachers. They're called my faculty senate. So I meet with them to get their input as to things that they want to see happen on the campus. So I think it's very important to give teachers input as well as to different things on the campus, and not being afraid as a leader to get feedback, even if it's not what you want to hear. Because at the end of the day, there are some
Right.
things that I'm going to do that they're not going to like. Sometimes I don't have a choice,
Right.
but
Right.
sometimes they tell me things and I'm like, you know what? I never really thought about it from your perspective. I'm looking at it this way. You're looking at it this way. And then sometimes it's a conversation of how can we meet in the middle. So I think it's just very important to make them feel appreciated as well. And my staff does a lot of shout outs to one another. You know, I want to thank
Mhm.
so and so for covering my duty today, or I want to celebrate this person. We have a sunshine committee that sends happy birthday emails out. Please say happy birthday to this person. And I have 235 faculty and staff members. So it is something that we have to really work at to make sure, because sometimes people go, I don't know who that person is. So we're always
Did you just
thinking about different things that we can do to kind of bring the staff together and create
yeah,
a fun environment for them to work in.
did you say that you have 235 staff members?
Faculty and staff, yes.
Faculty and staff. Okay, so I think you definitely made the right choice for not being a guidance counselor. You are much better suited for a leader, and I appreciate this conversation because those are really the true natural characteristics of a good leader,
Mhm.
you know. And so I love that. I appreciate that because teachers have different experiences. Some are lucky with admin, some are not.
Mhm.
But the hope here is for other principals who may be able to realize that, oh, hey, perhaps my school culture is not as good as it should be. Let me go ahead and see what I can do.
Mhm.
Hey, maybe my teachers can wear jeans every single day.
Mhm.
It's not that serious as long as they wear a nice shirt, and a
Mhm.
nice pair of jeans, right? We're not
Right.
talking
Oh, yeah.
about showing up in shorts or
Right.
something that's totally ripped. So I appreciate that, and those are the things that make all the difference in the world,
Mhm.
truly. I mean, it really is a very small ask. It doesn't cost you anything. And on the flip side, for the morale of all the teachers, it
Mhm.
really does boost them up. So thank you for
Well,
that.
and we also do Food Truck Friday. So it doesn't cost me a thing either, but I have a different food truck every Friday that's here for the entire lunchtime, and teachers go down and get their lunch.
Mm,
So, and we advertise that out. And so it's also a chance for teachers. They get to see each other when they're at the food truck placing their order. So they get to talk,
right.
and we'll cover classes if it's running late. So I don't know. I think it's the little things, but the key though, too, is that your leader has to love what they do. Because if your leader is unhappy in their own job, that trickles. And I love
Right.
what I do. And so it's
Mm.
important to me that everybody else feels that same way as well. So it's key.
I love that you have casual jeans all 5 days, because just months ago we've been speaking with a teacher from Las Vegas.
Mhm.
She was giving us a story again that they have only Fridays and they have to pay for wearing a jeans.
Yeah. No.
To raise more
This
funds.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. This is something crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Now we do pajama days, and we do have them pay, and our teachers will be in their pajamas, so, and we have
this is next level.
yes. And so it is something, we're raising money for something, right? So we'll do pajama day. And so it's the whole faculty and staff so they can wear their pajamas. And while I'm sure they're not wearing their actual pajamas, like I go buy pajamas specifically, right? It's still fun to see people come in
But
their
this
pajamas.
is fun. This
Yeah.
is fun. This is fun, and this is very nice for bringing the team together.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so Sherry, we all know that creating a positive school culture and community is an essential aspect of ensuring students have a supportive and productive learning environment, right? So I would like to know your approach to promoting a positive school culture and fostering a sense of community at your school.
So every year we pick a theme. This year it's We Are Legendary. And then I do a school shirt for the entire faculty and staff. So we all have the same shirt. Our South Lake Chamber here in our community holds a teacher appreciation breakfast, and we come fully decked out, from the eye black with our school initials on it, to the matching shirts, to the crazy hats, to the air horns. And we've won 5 years in a row. So,
Wow.
because we come in full spirit mode. But I think, again, the key to a positive school culture is, if your teachers are happy, your students will be happy, your parents will be happy, and your students will perform naturally because they're in a positive environment. And I think it's the little things. I think sometimes as leaders, we get very bogged down and we have to do these big things for our staff. Like, we have to make it a big deal. And then where do we get the money and those types of things? And that's not the case. Again, it's like the jeans cost me nothing. But I think the big thing is autonomy, and give teachers the freedom to do their job and get out of their way. We can get in their way. We are not the ones in the classroom. I have not been a teacher in a classroom in 20 years, So for me to say, now, do I remember? Yes, but that was 20 years ago. The things are different. We've been through COVID. Children have changed just because of technology. All of these things, our world is different. And so for me to say I know exactly what they're going through, I don't. So I have to make sure that I'm supporting them. When it comes to parents, am I supporting them? Do they know that if a parent calls to complain, I'm going to support them? Now, what I'll tell them is, I can support you until I can't support you, right?
Right.
But I don't ever call them down in front of the parent. It will be later, a conversation, but they will always be supported with the parent, right? So I think it's just letting them know that they can trust you and that you're trusting them. I think that is the key thing. And then you bring in these fun, different things that you can do to make the environment enjoyable. But the key is giving them freedom in the classroom, because that is the one thing my teachers will say is, I love it here because I'm not told how I need to teach, what it needs to look like, and I'm trusted to do my job.
Yeah, that's
based on what I hear, I'm ready to fly and work in your school.
Come on. Yes, I would love it.
Yeah, it's actually one of the biggest pain points that we hear from teachers is the lack of autonomy. So you've hit that. Ms. Watts, actually, I do want to ask you a very complicated question, and it's an unfair question, which I don't have the answer to. You probably don't have the answer to, but given your experience in leadership, perhaps you have. So teacher pay, we're talking about if you look at the stats, over 20%, maybe even 25% of teachers have a second job outside, a supplementary job, not a full-time job. Some do, actually, right? To support the income, to support their families. Now, I'm a little familiar with this because we actually own a preschool in New York City, in Brooklyn.
Okay.
We're familiar with the budgetary process. So, this is not, we're on the same, we're on this same path here. What can we do? Whether it's principals or whether it's teachers, I mean, how do we advocate for a higher pay? Should there be higher pay? So I know it's a very complicated question, but what are your thoughts on that, given that you have much more expertise in this area?
It is a complicated question. Do I think there should be higher pay? Yes, of course. Then on the flip side, I can say they work 10 months out of the year, right? So if you equate their salary out over 10 months, they're off in the summer, they're off at the holidays, different things like that. I've heard people say, well, there's that piece of it too, which I see as well. The bottom line is they're required to have a degree. They're required to take tests to pass for the state. That is not the same in every career. They're required to continually show professional development and improvement. And these things all cost them money unless the school is willing to pay. Now, I pay for my teachers to get recertified. I cover those licensing fees and I cover their testing costs up to a certain extent. Does there need to be more pay? Yes. And for example, when I started teaching, the starting salary was 33,000 and change in 1999 here. It's
Mm-hmm.
just now, 24 years later, at 47.5. There is
Yeah.
no career that grows that slowly in the pay
Yeah.
ranks. And so that is the problem. And so I think we're going to have to get the public on board with understanding if teachers can't live, they're not going to go into the profession, and they're going to have to leave
Right.
just by, the natural course of things. And not every teacher is with a partner that has a job.
Right.
So, for
Right.
example, the challenge that I'm running into is that my teachers are getting outpriced of being able to live in the community in which they work. They
Mm,
can't afford an apartment without a roommate or working a second job. Well, this job is stressful and tiring enough than to have to turn around and go work at a Starbucks or run down to work at Disney or a clothing
mm,
store, or they're tutoring on the side, those types of things. So I think we're going to have to lobby the politicians. I think teachers are going to have to get extremely vocal, because it's not a local level. It really is a funding level at the state level in which we're going to have to start
yeah.
valuing the fact that we have a critical shortage of teachers across this country. And if we don't do something
Right.
about it, and people say, well, you don't do it for the money. Well, that's true. But if you can't put food on the table and you can't afford a
Right.
place to
Exactly.
live,
Right.
those things do matter. So we are going to have to, I think teachers are just going to have to get extremely vocal. But I also think the public as a whole needs to understand this is what they make, but this is what it costs to live. And they don't just put in a 7.5 hour day. It's beyond that.
Right.
So it's a conversation that has to occur. Um, other professions that are public servants make more money than teachers do, and yet we're required to have more of an education. And that is
Yeah.
a problem. And I think it's just going to take teachers coming together to vocalize it in a professional way with facts. But it can't, go into your local school board. They're not the problem. I mean, they're living with the funding constraints that they have from the
Right.
state as well.
Right.
So
Right.
we have to take it to a higher level. So how easily can a teacher take what they've learned in this particular course, whether it's online, in person, whatever, and apply it to the classroom without needing a ton of support? So, because if you're going to do a professional development that's going to require, excuse me, a lot of support, then you better be able to have that in place to make sure that that
Mm,
happens, or the implementation's not going to occur. And then it's following up, getting the feedback from the people that attended that particular learning to determine what their thoughts were, so that you know whether you need to tweak something, make it better, those types of things. So I think that's the key. It's a pretty simple formula, much like what teachers look at when they're deciding on a lesson in the classroom. What is the outcome that I
mhm.
want? Feedback from the student in an exit ticket. What's the content? What's the purpose? And what's going to be the impact? So similar thing for teachers as well.
So you currently serve on the professional development committee for the Florida Charter School Consortium. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the current trends or topics that are being discussed in terms of PD in education?
Closing the COVID gap is big,
Okay. Yeah.
because we're going
Okay.
to see ramifications from that for a very long time. I'm afraid, especially in our younger students as well, where they were not around other students during some very key developmental years.
Mm,
Now, the older students,
mm,
we're going to see impacts in the social emotional piece too, because socialization is important for them as well. Definitely social emotional learning is key. Getting students to know how to interact with one another again, because some families were much more strict about COVID isolation than others
mm,
were. So dealing with that.
yeah.
And then, bottom line, when teachers are teaching via virtually or via Zoom, it's not the same, especially when
Yeah.
teachers aren't virtual teachers. Now, if you're a virtual teacher and that's your
Right.
niche and that's what you've been doing all along, you know how to work around that. And that's what the student is expecting. But when you go from being in a classroom and then after spring break, you come back and you're not back and you're scrambling to figure out how to deliver instruction in a virtual way, that's a little different. So it wasn't at the level that it should have been, had they been coming to school. So definitely, and learning gaps too, gender equity gaps, closing those, the difference between
Mm,
males and females. cultural diversity to how do we become more
Mm.
diversified instructors based upon the population of students that we serve, different things like that. So those are kind of the key. And I think those have been pretty
Mm.
around for a very long time because learning gaps has
Right.
always been an issue in these
Right.
types of things.
No, I agree 100%. Learning gaps is a term that has not got it's not a new term at all, but now it's called the like COVID lost learning gap. But I think it's fair. Well, in your experience, I should say, is it fair to say that coming out of COVID, now that we're all back in the classroom, do you see a much more a significant learning loss because of COVID, as opposed to just the regular learning loss that we get from summertime and other things? Like across the board, are you seeing students with increased bad behavior, just performing poorer than the past years pre-pandemic?
It's interesting because our school, we have been fighting to get back to being an A school for so many years. And this past year, we got our A. We actually went up instead of back.
Wow.
So we were really excited about that. So for us, I don't think we saw those learning gaps as big because we went the other direction. However,
Right.
where we're seeing it is in the social emotional piece. We tend to see some kids in crisis. I think families went into crisis a little bit with, things that were going on and being home for that amount of time and isolated. So we're seeing more in the social emotional area of things than we are so much in the academic area, although we're seeing that too. But I would say
Right.
more in the mental health liaison work and our guidance counselor work and character ed and getting into those classrooms and talking about socializing and those types of things. So that's been more of at least what I've noticed.
Got it. Well, I want to talk very quickly about artificial intelligence. I'm sure it's all over the news
is.
now. Perhaps it's even discussed in your committee, as it should be. But with the emergence of sophisticated AI chatbots like ChatGPT, there's a growing debate over whether this technology is doing more harm than good. New York City districts have already banned the use of this. Many districts have followed suit. Others are saying, hey, this is the wrong move. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in general on AI. I don't know if you had the chance to play with ChatGPT, but is this going to be a major disruptor? And is this a point in time where in 2-3 years we're going to really need to reimagine the classroom?
I think AI is coming whether we want it to or not, right? So I think if we think for a minute that blocking it for the time being is going to keep it from being an occurrence, it's coming. There was a time when we didn't think technology would be as prevalent in schools either, and yet it is everywhere. So
Right.
I think to think we're going to fight it and keep it from happening is ludicrous, for lack of a better word. It's coming. I think it's how we navigate that, and that do we make sure that it's being done in a proper manner, because we are dealing with children. So the biggest thing, and I do not know a ton about it because I'm a little bit different. I am not super big on technology in schools all the time, simply because our students are engaged all the time on technology as it is. I am very much about them interacting with each other. I think that's where the value is, because they're so in tune to their devices. So,
Yeah.
but is it going to come to my school at some point? Certainly it is. AI is coming. It will be here. I think the biggest concern, as I was doing a little research in preparation for this, is that it's data collecting, whether we like it or not. They're collecting data. What do they do with that? What's going to happen with that?
Right.
And I think the key too is whoever has the artificial intelligence controls the narrative. So I think we just have to be very careful as to who has that information and how that's being used and disseminated back into our schools through this artificial intelligence. So those were kind of the two things for me that bothered me. It's coming. I mean, you get it on the bank when you're on your
Right.
bank app doing things. Can I
Right.
help you? Those types of things. So I think that's the biggie for me, is what are we doing with the data? And whoever controls that data and that information has the power to control that AI back into our schools. And we're dealing with minors whose minds are being framed and built
Right.
and all types of things like that. So I think that is a little bit of something that concerns me. However, it's coming. So we have to put in the parameters and the safeguards to make sure that that's done in a proper way when it comes to our youth.
I just want to say very quickly, I love the fact that um, the fact that you stated students are already using technology. They're already on their phones every single day. So when they come to the school, the classroom, that you prioritize the student to student interaction, teacher to student interaction, interactions with people, not more technology. And listen, I'm a huge proponent of technology, but you are absolutely correct. I think we need to go the opposite route, right?
Agreed.
Like teachers can use the technology tools to help them with their classroom, with their resources and X, Y, and Z. But for students, they're already on their mobile devices. They're already going to be experts at it. So I think school plays gives them a unique opportunity to almost be technology free. It might even be an unpopular opinion, but guess what? Like there are stories about the biggest tech CEOs and executives. Guess where their students go to?
Non-technology
A
schools.
Exactly.
Well, and pay
And
attention to that, right? America, pay attention to that, because these are the giants that are
right.
creating this stuff, but they don't want their kids on it. And some of them have even come out and
Exactly.
said their children don't even have devices. So we need to pay attention to that piece, because why are they creating this? But they don't want their own children on it. There's a reason, right? They're smart. There's a reason. And I think the big thing is that, for example, the technology issues I had, my son would have navigated that in 2.2 seconds. Like, this is the problem, in and out.
Yeah.
But are they able to problem solve with each other, or do they do everything
Right.
through texting and social media? You know, we see an increase in bullying on
Right.
social media. Well, it's easy to be that, keyboard warrior, right? When you're not facing somebody.
Yeah.
So we have to have our students talking to one another, because we are so connected as a society, but so disconnected as people. And
Yeah.
that is something
Yeah.
that I hate for my own child, because that's not the environment I grew up in. We didn't have those types of devices and that technology. I remember when the Apple computer actually came out, right? So, I mean, I'm giving my age away, but it's true. So, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I think it's valuable. I think there's a purpose for it, but I think it is key that we teach our children to engage with one another as human beings and set the device aside and give them a break from that, for sure.
And I also think that teachers should also teach it to kids, how to use these devices properly, how to use these technologies properly, how to communicate. I mean, this is also should be discussed in the classroom as well as at home when parents teaching their kids.
I agree. And I think the challenge for that is that we don't know it as well as they do. And so that is a big thing. And that is one of my pushes next year, is that we do have somebody come in to talk about all the different apps, even with my parents. Like, these are the apps, this is what they do, this is what can be done, and you can never see it on your child's phone, right? And our teachers need to know that too.
Right.
We have to get as savvy at it as they are. And it's what my son grew up with an iPad in his hand. We didn't, but we have to do a better job as educators of knowing those things too. And I speak completely from my own experience that I am not that knowledgeable about it. So we have to do that too, for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to education reforms. So education reforms has been a hotly debated topic for many years, as we know, with numerous ideas and experiments being proposed to improve the education system. And I'm sure as a school leader, it is important to stay informed on the latest developments in education reform.
Yes.
So my question to you is, which education reforms you believe hold the most promise and why you support them?
Charter schools. I think by creating competition, you're already raising the bar. Education for years was the only real monopoly, and I think by infusing charter schools into that, as much as there are people in support and against them, it has caused a need for everybody to do better, which we needed to do anyway. We should be doing better. I also think it's important that we are really making connections and business partner connections within our community, and making those businesses partners with us, not only for the financial help that they can bring to a school, but because it also, we can use them to come into our schools to work with our children to see real world application of the things that we're teaching them. Because so many times you hear students say, when am I ever going to use this? When am I ever going to use this? When am I ever going to use
Right.
this? And if we can have business partnerships where we're bringing those people in to talk about how that is applied, that's going to be very key for us as well. Also, many times your business partnerships are very tied politically, right? So if you can get them on
Yeah.
board with your school and they can see what's happening in your school, they have a voice or the ear of a politician that you may not readily have access to. And that is going to be key as well. So I think for me, charter schools and creating competition is important. I also think the business partnership piece, and I'm certainly a proponent of common standards, and not everybody is, but I do believe in a common standards across the country, because we are such a mobile society now. People are not living in their same community their entire life at the same level that they used to. My father was in the military. We moved every 3 years, and after he got out of the military, every year and a half, I went to 3 different high schools. I never learned Roman numerals. And the reason I never learned Roman numerals is because we left before the school that I was at taught it, and we got to the school and they'd already taught it. So I do think there is value in having common standards. So those are kind of my key ones there.
I love all three of them. Were probably three of the most answers that have such heavy debate around them, right? You have so many people for it and against it, but I agree with you 100%. Competition, we need competition, and that's exactly what charter schools provide. And for those of you who don't know, charter schools actually need to prove the academic performance or you'll get shut down, whereas public schools, you can just fail all year round. I'm not saying that that's happening, but yeah, I mean, you're really not held to much standards at all. So I agree. I love that piece, and I love the piece about competition. It's exactly how capitalism works, right? It's how companies, it's how consumers end up getting better deals and better technology because there's competition created. We need more schools to come out and say, "Hey, I'm a great school." So the public school that's 3 blocks away is going to say, "Hey, hold on, our community members are dying to get into this school. What's wrong with our school? What are we doing? Do we have a bad culture? Are our students performing poorly?" So absolutely 100% competition. That is going to solve a lot of the problems. Ms. Watts, I do want to ask you one last question. Thank you so much for your time. Who has been the most strongest or most inspiring person in your life, and what lessons have you learned from them?
So my grandmother, my dad's mom. So she lost her husband at a pretty young age, was a vice president of a bank when females did not hold those positions. And I remember going to see her at the bank where she was, and she was the only female at any type of a level like that in the banking industry in her area. Resilient, strong, but also very feminine, soft-spoken, but when she spoke, you listened, right? But at the same time, was the epitome of a strong woman without losing that femininity, right? And so for me, just being resilient, pushing forward after she lost my grandfather, rising to the level that she rose to, just strength. I have her paperweight that sits in my office that used to sit on her desk. So very much my grandmother.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I love asking that question because it really gets to show you. We can sit here and talk about education and policies and laws, but at the end of the day, that's what we're here for: human connection. Even though we're virtually speaking right now, but every story that people share, it's very meaningful, and it's very meaningful to us. Ms. Watts, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being a principal. Thank you for being a leader for all these years. I mean, you're leading so many teachers and faculty members. It's not easy, but we need people like you. We need teachers that support and love their leaders. So thank you so much for all that you do, and thank you so much for spending some time with us today this morning.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the ability to have a voice. Thank you.
Of course. This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning educational publisher serving over 1 million students nationwide. If you're a kindergarten to 8th grade teacher or principal, be sure to check out our supplementary workbooks to get your students ready for standardized state testing. We cover all subjects from kindergarten to 8th grade. Use the coupon code AVENUE for a 25% discount off of all purchase orders. Visit us today at argoprep.com/store.